Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're about to do 3 Uncle Horror Stories animated by Dark Knights. Are you guys ready to get up into it? It's that time of the night. It's 12:50 a.m. for me. Let's get it. I am. Please subscribe to Dark Knights.
This happened to me a few years ago when I was 16 years old. I'm a petite person, and I've always looked younger than I actually am, even as an adult. People think I'm a teenager. When I was 16, my mum and I travelled to my home country for the holidays. We were so happy because we were only able to afford a plane ticket once every 2 years, and as time went by and we missed out on stuff going in our families' lives, this time my aunt, my mum's sister, and let's call her Sylvia, was pregnant with her first child. My mum and I didn't know Sylvia's new husband's family, so we were introduced to my aunt's husband, James, who was 38, his brother, let's call him Michael, who was 44, and his wife, who was 9 months pregnant. We quickly welcomed them into our family, because they were so nice and friendly, and we felt like we'd known them for years.
It's always the nice ones.
One day, late after a party at my aunt's house, I was told someone would take me to sleep over at my grandma's house. My grandma lives all the way across town, and I'm the only one who was related to her. People were drunk and sleepy, and no one could give me a lift, so Michael offered to take me there on his motorcycle. My aunt said something like, "Thanks, you're a lifesaver," and I didn't think anything of it. I probably told myself that, okay, well, I guess my new uncle is taking me there. I had to climb on the motorcycle since I am so small, and my aunt waved us goodbye at the door. We left and he asked me to put my arms around his waist so I wouldn't fall. I remember it was a cold night, and he said, "If you're cold, you can hug me tight," which I thought was a bit weird. And after about 15 minutes, I noticed that he was taking a detour that went in the opposite direction. I didn't say anything because I thought he had a reason for this. But then we arrived at a big
you gotta
park,
say
which was
something.
very dark, and there were only about 4 people that I could see in the distance. He pulled up under a tree so it was even darker, but we didn't get off the bike. He then turned around and started putting his hand on my cheek and my hair. At this point, I was so confused and scared I felt paralyzed, and realized that this man wasn't actually family. He's just some strange grown-up man.
Yep, he is.
He said, "You're so pretty. I didn't think you were so pretty in real life."
Bruh.
I was so nervous. I think I started to smile out of anxiety and fear, which I do when I'm uncomfortable, and I said, "What?" He then leaned in, got close to my ear and said, "You want to go to a hotel nearby?
This man.
We don't have to spend the night, and I'll take you home right after." Now, I don't know why, but all I could think of was his 9-month pregnant wife, and I said, "No, I want to go to my grandma's house," still with a smile as I didn't want to make him angry. He insisted so many times, and I said no every time. He was so creepy. I thought he was going to ignore my request, when he finally gave up and took me to my grandma's. I immediately jumped off the motorcycle and ran inside, and he took off before my grandma opened the door. I told my aunt about this, and I don't know if she even believed me or just dismissed my story, so I never told anyone else ever again. Up until I was 18, he would message me on Facebook from time to time, saying how pretty I was that night. It was so weird, because I could see him posting about his new daughter and his wife. I can't help think that he thought I was younger and he could convince me more easily.
What is that?
Back in '89, our town was going through some
Dark
big
Knights with the
changes,
animation.
and a new nuclear plant was being moved to that place. So our town became the last stop before the plant, and that brought in people. New people. Smart out-of-town people were moving to our place and making it the ideal place of development and progress. The place where once the most technological thing was the local radio station was now getting things that were blowing people's minds. Ever since the new people moved in as the construction started, we got an arcade, a movie theater, a shopping mall, and all the new city things. At first, The locals were enraged over the idea of strange people coming in and taking business. But soon, everybody was getting employed.
They all
The
do
new
that.
school started
In
construction.
Reese,
It was
did they
going
get
to bring in
employed?
more
They
opportunities for
forget
students.
it like it ain't never
and
happened.
more and more horizons were opening up for the place. My father, on the other hand, was very skeptical of all of this. He never wanted these people to come in. He always said, "If Oppenheimer was scared of the things that he made, how could we be so sure that these things will work for us?" And there was this one thing that he always said: progress comes at a price. He was a farmer.
Everything comes at a
Deeply
price.
rooted in the land, and everything modern scared him.
Life comes at a price.
The people from the government sent him a proposal of buying land and tried their best. At first, my father refused. But then one of the family friends that were working with the government told him that the bank will eventually seize the land, so it is better to get it for the value than just getting it seized. My father had no choice but to accept the offer. The money from the land was put onto investment, and I was sent to New York for further study, where I lived with my aunt. And my father and mother relocated to another house a bit distant from the plant. I was out in New York going during August, and I was busy with the classes. I came back home and saw my aunt. She was in tears that there was this weird gut feeling that I had. My aunt came in. She held me tightly and told me that our town was gone. I thought at first that maybe it is one of her moods. She always had those. She was a 35-year-old single woman working in theaters. She was doing a Shakespeare play at that time, and all I could think of was that maybe this is one of her melodramatic moments. I just held her.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Then
Is
she
it
dropped the
blowing up or
bomb
what?
and said, "It's our town. Devon is gone now, blown into pieces.
Oh,
There was a nuclear accident, something about the leaks. They say that the people are barely alive and they are being quarantined at the moment." It all hit me so quickly. All I wanted to do was go up to the town and look into the matter. But there was nothing in the media. It was being kept a hush. I was worried and sick to my stomach, and there was no way to contact our parents. Then one day out of the blue, a month later, we got the call. It was covered with a feeble voice, and it was my father telling me that they were all right and they were sheltered from the accident, and that the whole town was all right. It was really weird to hear from them about a month later everything, and he told me not to tell this to anyone. It was strange, and there was something very different about his voice. It was too gentle with me.
they
That
deep
is not
faking
what
out
he
here?
usually is when it comes to talking to me. It seems as if the accident just broke him, and then later, I asked him to put the mother on phone. And while he was doing that, I could hear the radio noise at the background, which was very different from the noise we hear on a crooked telephone. It was almost like a chatter that would come from a busy office. I asked him for his location, and at that moment, the phone got disconnected, and I wasn't even able to talk to Mother. My aunt was much more relieved to hear the news about them being alive. And even though I was pretending to be happy, there was something that was worrying me. I had a
I'd be
gut
worried,
feeling
too.
that something else was going on there.
Sound like some deep
I did
fake
not tell her
action.
about anything, as it was the last thing I wanted her to worry about. And then by saying that I am going off on a camp, I decided to look into the matter on my own. I went to the nearest town, and to my surprise, everything within the 10-mile radius of our town was now basically a government jurisdiction area. I had to sneak around the fences to get the protective gear.
Oh, this
I was going into this alone. And to my surprise,
is a new
there was not a
move.
single hit of radiation in that place. It was all a cover-up story. There was no sign of any radioactive accident, and not a single house looked destroyed.
Man,
Whatever was happening, government sure wanted to keep it top secret, knowing that there's no risk of getting exposed to radiation was a relief, and it helped me right back on track to look for the real thing. I entered my home quietly, and everything was placed right where
Sorry
it
about
was.
that.
I did not realize that there were already
See.
camera placed into the system, when suddenly,
It's
my phone
interesting.
rang. It was Dad. He asked me what I was doing there when I was warned to stay away. I asked him what happened, and then what he told me was much harder for me to believe than it is for you. He said it was the night, and they were all asleep, and suddenly, everything started shaking. We were all going through the drill that we have been told about. And as we got out of bed, we just were broken into these million particles, and we lost our physicality. And we woke up, and we saw that the only way to be present is through electricity or source of it. And everyone in the town is alive, but we are all nothing more than living electromagnetic waves.
You think
He
this could
told me he
happen?
cannot explain to me how it feels, but then he told me to come closer to the television. And then as I did, without powering it on, I saw my father inside the television. And there he told me that this is the only way that can. And also said that last he saw my mother was when she tried getting into the computer. She has been lost since then.
Well, the
I
computer's
was
a
confused. And everything
extraordinary
was
place.
unreal. Until a unit invaded my house and took me with them to a lab. All the way, I was begging to not kill me. And then I met Dr. Laudsky, and she told me to not worry. Since I was already a computer science student, she told me that my exposure is risky. It was at that moment that my life took a drastic turn.
They
And
kidnapped
I
you.
could never escape this place. Not without finding a way to get them all out first.
I was
After
just,
searching for 2
they
years,
didn't kidnap them, but
I finally cracked the case, or the code, I must say. But in the carelessness, I made myself particleized.
yeah.
But good thing is that I
Interesting,
get
huh?
to understand everything from 0 to 1 now that I am a binary code.
I grew up in quite a large college town, and
I ain't
since
gonna
the
comment on
university
that.
here is of a pretty
I'm
good
gonna just leave
standard,
that story
I figured I
alone.
could save a ton of money by living with my parents while pursuing my studies. The only real trouble was that the campus was literally on the opposite side of town than we were, so getting to and from campus proved quite a chore sometimes. So between my mom, dad, and uncle, they divided up the week and each picked a day or two where they'd give me a ride home. I'll admit, it did make me feel like an 18-year-old preschooler sometimes, and I still feel like I missed out on the party scene in many ways. But that kind of lifestyle would have definitely hit my grades hard, so I have few regrets. There was one time, though, something I'd considered a serious close call. And if it wasn't for having to wait for a ride most nights, it never would have happened at all. So it was the second semester of my freshman year. It was about 4:30 and my uncle was due to come pick me up from the student parking lot. He normally arrived like 5 or 10 minutes late. Rush hour can't be helped, but after like 20 minutes of waiting, I decided to give him a call to see where he was at. "Oh, shoot, it's my day? Oh, Lacey, I'm so sorry. Please don't tell your mom. I'm on my way right now, I promise." He sends me. No biggie, right? Sure, I was kind of annoyed, but
What you mean
if
it's
he
my
was on
day?
his way, waiting another
Should
half
have
hour
that
or so
scheduled.
wouldn't be a problem. So I just sat my butt down on the curb, got out one of my textbooks, and
It's
started
dark.
an impromptu study session. After about 20 minutes or so, the sun is almost set when I see the lights of a vehicle turning into the parking lot. But I'm disappointed to see that it's not my uncle. It's just this random white van that parks up and just sits there for a while. I
Look at
figured
that
it's a
animation.
cleaning lady or a janitor or whatever, but when the guy gets out, he was wearing plain clothes. We made some awkward, accidental eye contact, and that prompted him to say, "Hey there." Being polite, I returned the greeting, thinking he's just going to carry on his way, but instead, he walks up to me and tried to carry on the conversation. "Waiting for someone?" he asked me.
Fuck it
just
look
nodded,
like? Yes, of
kinda
course.
shy at first, and he says, "Me too, I'm waiting for my daughter." For the next few minutes, he engaged me in a casual conversation about the college and about his daughter. I didn't mind at first, but it was actually getting dark by that point, so I was getting more and more nervous about my uncle getting there and ended up kind of zoning in and out while I kept an eye out. Then he started to come closer. "Ah, look, it's going to rain," he pointed out. And he wasn't wrong. Those big dark rain clouds had been gathering as the sun went down, another reason why I was worried about not getting a ride. "Say, want to come take shelter in my van if the heavens open up?"
What kind of offer is
Immediately,
that?
I got extra nervous when he mentioned owning a van because I'm pretty sure everyone's aware of the whole stereotype about kidnappers using vans and whatnot. So I try to remain polite, but at the same time, I give the guy a resounding no and was relieved when he seemed to just drop the subject immediately. But he doesn't give up.
He ain't gonna
After
give
a few
up.
minutes, he asked if I wanted to ride home.
No,
I was pretty confused.
it's the same
Like,
offer.
Wasn't he supposed to be waiting for his daughter? And when I asked him that, it was like he just remembered that, yeah, he was there waiting to give his daughter a ride.
Yeah, he ain't there for his
That's
daughter.
the point where the alarm bells start really going off.
Good job for
The guy
you.
was obviously lying to me, and in the worst attempt to, distract me from it or whatever, he starts telling me, "You know, at first I thought you were my daughter. You look so much like her." I just nod, praying for my uncle to show up so I can get away from this creep. And he
But you
starts asking
flirting
me,
with your daughter.
"Hey, what's your name? Maybe you and her share a few classes." Then, as if he was heaven sent, I see my uncle's car appear at an intersection down the road away.
These dudes be trying too
Perfect
hard.
timing. I mean, he legitimately couldn't have timed it any better. So I get up, wish the guy a good evening, then start walking to the entrance to the parking lot so I can just jump into my uncle's car. But as I try to walk past him, the van guy actually grabs me by the arm and stops me from walking away. "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you here," the guy said, like I owed him my time. And know if it wasn't for the fact that my uncle rolled into the parking lot, I'd have been in quite a bit of trouble. The guy only let go when he saw my uncle driving up, but by then, it was too late. I was so scared that I burst into
That's why
tears.
these women are
My
scared
uncle
of a
got out
lot of
his car
things.
and almost started chasing the guy, demanding to know who he was. The
That's
guy
a
just
good
got back
uncle
into his
right
van
there.
and drove off, but I made sure to let certain faculty members know so that a safety announcement could be made, or however the college dealt with threats like that. I wasn't even the only girl he tried to kidnap either, and the cops honed in on the guy because a previous complaint had been filed against him. And I suppose all's well that ends well, but at the same time, I was so very, very close to not being okay at all. Who knows? I might not have ever gone home that night, and I'm eternally grateful to my uncle for showing up just when he did. For context, I am female and currently
Tell
21
you,
years
y'all
old.
women gotta watch
Though at
out.
the time of this event, I was 16 years old. I've never viewed myself as an attractive person. I've always been kind of chubby. I had bad acne in my teen years. I never cared at all what I wore, and I almost never wore makeup. I was an extremely awkward teen who had barely any friends and next to no self-esteem due to a very abusive relationship I had a few years prior. But that's a different story entirely. My point is that I was a completely different person during this time, and looking back, I know how naive I was and what I should have done instead to better protect myself. So it was the year 2015, and I was going on my very first
That's when
cruise
I
with my
graduated
family.
high school.
It was an 8-day, 7-nights cruise that was taking place a few days after a tsunami had passed nearby.
I don't go on those
After
anymore.
a rocky start.
I'm
Literally,
good.
the boat rocked back and forth the first 2
I
days,
am
and everyone
good.
was miserable. And me suffering a slight panic attack during a routine evasion drill. I'm claustrophobic and really hate crowds. It ended up being one of the best weeks of my life, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Some of the downsides to this cruise was the fact that it was a North State cruise taking place in
The
October,
things they go
which
to
meant
for
chilly
fun.
weather and no swimming. And because it was during a school year, I was the only guest my age on that cruise. The closest age to me, I think, was either 6 years old or 40 years old. So that kind of stunk, although I did end up crushing hard on our assistant dinner time waiter who was around 30 years old and had the sweetest smile I'd ever seen. Anyways, time to get to the meat of the story. So as far as I know, most cruises have at least one formal night where everyone dresses up really nice for dinner and they serve special meals like lobster, steak, etc. As I said before, I wasn't the most attractive person out there, but I did doll myself up for this special occasion. I wore a turquoise knee-length dress, tan-colored high heels, my mom curled my blonde hair, and I put on some makeup that really made my blue eyes pop. I honestly did feel kind of pretty that night.
I like blue.
Dinner was amazing, and
Cool.
I finally got to try lobster tail for the
I
first
approve.
time. Loved it. I also, of course, made eyes and mildly flirted with our assistant waiter. I made him laugh because of how red my face would get whenever my dad called me out on it. So after our dinner, my family and I all decided to go our separate ways for the night. There was a bunch of events going on that each of us wanted to get to. Well, except for me, who spent most of the cruise finding random relaxing spots to sit and draw. I was, and I've always been, an avid artist. So anyways, after a couple of hours, I decided I wanted to find my dad for some reason that I don't exactly remember. My mom had told me that he was going to the karaoke thing going on, so I started making my way around the ship, looking for wherever this was happening at. That's when I met him. I noticed him staring at me, and at first it was flattering. Like I said, I was average looking and had next to no self-esteem, so having anyone of the opposite sex look at me and smiling made me feel good. He looked to be not too much older than I was and was dressed in a cruise employee uniform.
Hey, easy
So I
pickings,
decided
it
to approach
seems.
him and ask if he knew where the karaoke room was. His smile never left as I asked him, and in a thick Indian accent he told me that he didn't know, but that we could search together for it. I thought it was a little weird at first that he was an employee but didn't know where an event was taking place, but I brushed it off and thought it was possible for some newer employees to not know where everything was yet.
Nah, that's
So
not
he and
possible.
I started walking around the ship together and casually chatted while doing so. He told me his name was Felix and was 21 years old. He also, as I suspected, did recently start working for this cruise liner a few months ago. For the record, I did find him kinda cute and liked how comfortable he felt talking to me about his life. As we continued walking around, he told me about how he was born and raised in India, how his family was kind of poor, how rooster fights were illegal back home, but he watched them anyways and stuff like that. I enjoyed listening to his stories about life in a different country, considering I've never been anywhere but America at this point in my life. We had eventually stopped looking for my dad and were just walking and talking together. We were now standing outside on the deck and leaning against the railing. I admired how beautiful and ominous the dark water reflected
How is
the
this
stars.
possible? Shouldn't he
It was
get
as if we were
fired?
floating in the galaxy. It was completely
He left
beautiful.
his post.
He then started telling me how lonely he was and how hard it is working on a cruise ship and watching hundreds of couples being romantic together while he has no one. I told him that I understood how he felt because I was also single and hated feeling alone. He looked at me and told me he was surprised that I don't have a boyfriend because of how beautiful I was. I blushed and looked away as I told him that most guys back home don't look at me twice, and he was surprised by that. You know that feeling when someone or something is behind you, and you can't see it, but you know you can sense it's there? Well, I felt something behind my head, and when I turned around to find
right
out
in
what
front
it
of
was,
his face,
before I
wasn't it?
realized what was happening, Felix's face was right in mine, and he planted an unexpected kiss on me. I pulled back in surprise, and he asked me what I thought about it. I stuttered nervously and tried to think of a reply. Now, yes, I was a naive young person who was always looking positively at people, but I wasn't completely stupid. This is a 21-year-old stranger who was flirting with a 16-year-old girl. I also had the sudden
You
realization
flirting with him
that
back?
no one knew where I was or who I was with. Before I could even say anything,
Bruh.
Felix started telling me how he knew of a couple of spots on this ship where we could be alone to do things together.
This man.
I started panicking and really wanted to
plotting.
get away from him. Now, another fault
She's
of mine
funny.
is that I'm way too nice for my own good, and I'm always afraid of hurting people's feelings or coming across as a mean person, even when I'm clearly in a dangerous situation.
You do all this
I'm
flirting,
still
and
too
you get in
friendly
this
to everyone
situation,
now, but nowadays,
and now it's a
I have
problem.
much more of a backbone and wouldn't have a problem telling someone like Felix to kindly screw off. But as I said, I didn't have that confidence back then, and I had no clue how to get out of the situation. Felix put his arm around my waist and started guiding me toward one of the areas he was talking about. I started stuttering. Maybe we shouldn't. We just met, and we might get caught, and you'd be in trouble, and my father might be looking for me. I know that sounds dumb, but I was trying to make him think of ways where this could be bad for him, so it seemed like I was trying to look out for him. Don't judge me too harshly. He told me not to worry about it because people mess around with staff sometimes and their boss never finds out.
Plotting.
That only made me panic even more. He leaned in for another kiss, and I stupidly let him because I was scared of making him angry.
You better be
After the
scared.
long, uncomfortable kiss, I slightly turned away and told him I just wanted to keep looking at the night sky. He insisted that we should start messing around because we don't have much time together.
This man.
I tried to hold back from crying at this point.
It's been like 20
And
minutes.
by the grace of the good Lord above, my phone suddenly made a noise, and I noticed my father had texted me asking where I was. I tried to mask my relief, but I immediately told Felix that I had to get going because my dad was wondering where I was and that he was very protective of me. Felix showed his disappointment to me saying that, but then he asked me for my phone number. My heart sank, and
I would have
I
gave
gave
him
it
my
to
dad's phone number.
Again, stupid young female who doesn't know how to say no. I'm aware of how foolish that was. It was a good thing I didn't give him a fake, though, because he immediately texted my number to prove its authenticity. Once I thought he was satisfied, I started saying goodbye and walking away. He grabbed my wrists and spun me back toward him and asked for a hug goodbye first. I sheepishly agreed and gave him a light hug. I wanted to start crying when he squeezed me tight and pulled me against his groin and asked if I could feel it, if you know what I mean. I quickly stepped away and sped walked towards my hotel room.
This dude don't know
I
how
made
to
sure
be
he didn't follow
romantic
me,
at
and
all.
Once I was safely inside my room, I hopped on my bed and started crying. Of course, I couldn't tell my parents about this because I would be in trouble for putting myself in this situation. Or
You
so I
damn
thought.
right.
I promise my parents aren't really like that. I know now that in reality my former Marine father would have tracked Felix down and let him know to never touch his daughter again.
Former
A few
Marine
minutes into
father.
my cry, and my phone vibrated with a
That's
text
why
from
she
an unknown
avoided
number
it.
claiming it was Felix. I wanted to block him immediately, but again, stupidly, I was afraid that would anger him and he would somehow find me. So I answered him and we talked for a few minutes. We kept talking about how he wanted to see me again before I
HLO?
left the next day, which at this point I repeatedly thanked God for, and I kept telling him that it just wasn't possible because my parents didn't want me leaving my room for the rest of the night, which was a lie. I did eventually end up leaving my room and asked an older female employee where the karaoke event was, which she immediately took me to. Side note, the room was literally 2 hallways down from where I first found Felix, and I kicked myself for that later. I found my dad and didn't leave his side for the whole rest of the night. Luckily, I was able to enjoy the rest of my night dancing around with my father, and I did hide around him whenever I spotted Felix walking around, who was making it obvious that he was looking for me. I know the story isn't as scary as the most on here, but at the time, it was terrifying to me, and my own kindness could have got me into a very bad situation. The moral to my story is that everyone needs to be careful when going on cruises or other types of vacations. Just because someone wears an employee uniform doesn't mean they're trustworthy. There's many people out there who take advantage of kind people and want to use that against them. Just please make sure whoever you're with always knows where you are, and don't put yourself into risky situations.
The moral of the story is you need to smarten up. You got a Marine father, a former Marine father. You should have some classes took on self-defense and what to do in these situations. Anyways, that was Dark Knights with that animation. Do y'all ever believe the second story? I've seen another channel have that same type of story, but I kind of I don't know what the heck is it. It was a little bit different though. I don't know. They had a similar type of story like that. I was like, okay. Hey man, that's you. You somehow wrote this in, and yeah. That makes sense. Anyways, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Why not? Peace out.